Hey guys, it's CarsWithBen here, and in today's video I'm going to talk about the S chassis, and I'm going to talk about some of the cars that have come out in that time, but mainly the top 5 most iconic of the lot, some of my favourites that have come out from the 80s and 90s of Japan. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I've really enjoyed making it. I really wanted to make a little tribute to the S chassis, so here it is. Obviously, just wanted to say before we get started, there are many cars, as you can see here, that are officially S chassis, but obviously I will be prioritising the top 5 the main ones that everyone loves and knows. So let's do it. The first car on this list is the Nissan 180 SX, a car you probably know very well. This was produced from 1988 to 1998 and has been around for a very long time in the S chassis platforms. Now, this is probably one of the most popular cars because it was really iconic for its looks, and it's just been in so many racing games throughout that time. Now, this is for me probably up there for my favourite. However, I will save that one to last because there are a lot of good variations you can do this car. So as you can see here, it can be pretty much all standard, and then it can be seriously modified up until the point of drift cars, and they were the most popular drift cars back in the early 90s as well, and still today if you were going to go to a show. Now, these were made in several different forms and very popular in the US market, where they actually made a few convertibles, as you can see here. And yeah, it was a great car. It came with a twin cam engine, and it was a very, very popular and reliable car, which made it very, very popular to buy. And a lot of people wanted to modify them because as stock, they looked pretty standard. But I think you can really see the potential of this car. A lot of cars you can't, but with this you can really start to see potential once you start to do little bits to it. And, you know, steering wheel, wheels, interior, engine, anything suspension, this car looks great in every single form. Now, it was different depending on which area you bought. So if you bought it in Europe, it was named slightly differently. Maybe the 240 SX was sold in America, as well as the 180, 200 SXs in South Africa. So yeah, variation, but this was my first choice of car for the S chassis. Up next is probably the crowd favourite. It is the PS13 or S13 as it's known, and this is where things get a little bit complicated because this was made in the same time as the 180 SX from 88 to 94, but just for less time. And these are really popular in North America and rebadged as 200 SXs, but these weren't necessarily imported as much, and this is why you see most of them that were still in Japan, as it was named Car of the Year in Japan as well. Now, this was one of the most popular S cars, just for the fact, even though it looked standard and really basic, once it was modified, it was a pretty cool racing machine and drift machine. Now, these came with 1.8 to 2 litres engines, and they were pretty powerful for what they were for a little car, and they were just very, very well made and very fun to drive. Now, this is where I get a little bit confused because this was a completely different car from the 180, but shared similar platforms and had very much relatable engines and interiors. But for the most part, this was a completely sort of facelifted car, and the S13 was just a very special car where they produced in the PS13, which was a more powerful model, and it just became very, very special with its additions. So there's also the Salati, which was another version of the Silvia, which was basically a very powerful, very cool, also known as the K's car, which the family of S chassis is very complicated, so I really want to try and get as much info into this as possible. But basically, they were also known as Koukis, which I will go on to in a minute. Moving up now to the S14. Now, this is where things get a little bit exciting. Now, I have to say this is my least favourite S chassis car of the range. I just didn't like this one as much. And it's purely a facelift thing, really, because it is very similar to the next car I will explain about. But the S14, which was the first, known as the Zenki, was a pretty awesome car with a 2-litre 16-valve turbocharged, good for 197 horsepower. Now, these were very, very, very popular because they sort of became into the Fast and Furious world. This is when they started to have popularity, and they were very modifiable. So a lot of people loved these early days of the Zenki, and it was just a great car. There was so much you could do and such a great platform. And you'll notice the back there looks very similar to the car I will talk about next. Now, what was great about these cars is they came in very different forms. Now, again, with a lot of the S chassis, if you didn't know much about it, you just see it as a normal car, such as this red one. But if you look into that engine, it had a huge turbo and a lot going on with that strut brace, just a massive, massive 1.9 to 2 litre engine, and it was just really, really well built, again, as all Nissans were. Now, there wasn't much going on with the interior at the time. As you can see, a lot of this interior was pretty much standard as it came, and you wouldn't really think much of it. In fact, they almost look like sleeper cars for most people. If you were a car fan, you'll know instantly that this had a lot of potential. And yeah, these were really popular when they came from 1995 up into the 2000s with the various facelifts, which I'll go on to in a moment. I think what's great about these is once you get a good spec and a good condition one, put new wheels on it, it can look pretty awesome. Now, for me, like I said, I just didn't like that front face. It just wasn't as nice as the next one. Speaking of the next one, imagine yourself, it is now the late 90s and things have really progressed with the Silvia and the S body, and now we have the updated facelift model, which is known as the 200SX, and this is where people start to really love this car. This is where Nissan really know the potential of this car when they started building it. And really it was the same as the Zenki, but this time it was known as the Kouki, which in Japanese means it's the updated version effectively. Now this sort of ran from up to around 2000, especially with the older version, the S14, and it can get pretty complicated like I said, but these were very much lower and wider than the S13, which is why you'll note when you see one it just looks quite big, especially like for the American market. What I love about these is it still shared the same engine and pretty much platform as the Zenki that we just saw, but it was a bit more aggressive for the facelift, and I just really enjoyed that. Here you can see a super clean example of which there's just so much modifications going on in that body, and it's probably one of the most popular because you might have seen it, for example, in the Fast and Furious, or you might have seen it in a lot of Need for Speed games. And finally, everyone, it is the car that you've probably been waiting for most, and it's the final version of the S chassis, and my favourite by far, it is the S15 Silvia. Now, this was the very last S car that's been made on the list, as you can see here on Wikipedia, from 1999 only to 2002, so a very short production run of the S15, and this came in various forms. Now, you might remember it from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, which was a very popular library car, and it was just not sold in every country, so it was only sold in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, that sort of thing, so it didn't come to the UK, for example, and that's a massive shame because this is a very popular car to import, especially in the UK right now with the JDM scene going off. And it also came in various specifications, so it came in at the specification R, which was a really cool sport and aggressive car. It also came in the Varietta, which looked awesome. It came in the Spec S, and it just looked amazing. So as you can see here, they became really popular to modify, and they didn't look real. I thought they were fake when I first saw it, but yes, the Varietta is completely real, and it was a convertible offered by Nissan and the Silvia model just to make it even cooler, which I think is amazing. Now, they only made 1,100 of them, but it just looks so immaculate, and if you ever see one, it's a very special car. It's very uncommon to see. Yes, and the engine was, of course, always a 2-litre engine, and it was a very, very popular turbocharged engine which produced, for the most part, 250 horsepower, so they really upped it for the final version of the S, and it was a pretty powerful, cool car. It came with that turbo as well, and the interior got improved throughout the years with the S15, and it just looked really, really good inside, and it had the badging, which, you know, if you're a fan of the Silvia, you'll know is really popular. The Special S and the Silvia badge just really, really made it all cool. For me, this has got to be by far my favourite S car, not only because it was in Fast and Furious and driven by Han, but it just looked cool. Now, obviously, again, with all S body cars, once you see a stock version, you might not think about it as being a particularly special car, but if you can see past the modifications, up to the modifications, and really see the spec of it, it looks awesome. And even in the Silvias were made to look a bit more sporty this time, so you wouldn't mistake them for what they are. And I think one of my favourites of the lot and the upgrades. Hey everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this S chassis tribute video. I put a lot of effort into making it, and I hope you've really enjoyed it as much as I have making it. If you do want to see more car content from me, please hit a like, leave a subscribe, and just let me know that you've enjoyed the video. Hit in the comments down below. I'll see you guys in the next car content video.